Добрый день.
Good morning. Let's begin. My name is Andrey Fefelov. I'm representing Master Pro company. I'm technical director. We will have a masterclass today, and we will discuss the topic of building a simple HA cluster based on Postgres Patroni and the tools which we show here on the board. You will learn how to do it. We will do it together, and after the masterclass, you will be able to take the materials and play with them in your sandboxes and see how it all works. Are there any people here in the room who want to do the masterclass on their own, but don't have the tokens like this, and you have the laptop, which is the most important thing? You will need only the browser. So, on this slide, we have a setup which we're going to roll out today using and during our masterclass. As you can see, it's not very complicated. We have here only 3 hosts. We will do it step by step. And now let's take a look at our setup. You can also look at it on your laptops. It is already more complicated. The main thing is here that our basis for our masterclass, we use our production playbooks, which we use in production, and we use Patroni on 3 servers as we do it here during our masterclass. But on the metal servers, the host you can use it with the input data I provided to you. You will have the Docker and Docker station, this green thing which I show you, and inside there will be 3 more Docker and Dockers with hosts as H0, H1 and 2, and inside them we were going to have the console and Docker with the Postgres on board with embedded Patroni and Wal-G in order to and do all these experiments. This will completely repeat our production setup. Please check on your laptops these commands, and also go to the link, use the link, and enter the environment. Also check the commands copy-paste in different browsers, and please switch off all extensions, NetBlock and others, which could break the interaction with GOTI, which is used for emulation. If something doesn't work, please tell me. Paste, try Shift Insert and Control Insert. Doesn't help, then open Firefox and Chrome. Does anyone has problems? No? Also no. Copy paste. With a mouse, right click in Chrome. Try Chrome. A few words about our setup. We use Ansible. Who worked with Ansible? Very, very good. Just in a few words, Ansible is a tool for server orchestration. It's quite flexible, stylish, and cool, and we're going to use it. We have 3 roles, which we're going to use. Infra, which installs the hardware emulation, Consul, and for Patroni, we have Postgres with Patroni on board. If you use the link, you can open all these roles and you can check them, you can try and fill them, send a request if you are not happy with something. A few words about Patroni now. On my opinion, Patroni has become a standard to build high available Postgres clusters on them, and according to authors, it uses bot pattern for Postgres, which it plays the default configuration, promotes different things, slaves and masters, read-only mode if necessary. Consul also uses external distributed systems for configuration storage in order to store cluster configuration there, and it is based on their implementation of protocols. And how can we describe them better? The protocols which provide the integrity of the cluster, for instance, Raft, Paxos, and it doesn't try anything to implement there, as it's done, for instance, in RIP MGR. Also, automatic failover, switchover is available. Failover means that on some reasons master loses the connection to slaves. One of the slaves should be a master. It is done automatically in Patroni. Switchover, similar situation, but done manually for maintenance purposes or other things. Besides that, Patroni, on my opinion, completely quite arguable, provides fencing. Fencing is a story when an old master on some reason is out of the cluster and it shouldn't come back to the cluster in the role of the master when the connection is installed. To avoid inconsistency, fencing means that when the system should bring out the old master without bringing it back to avoid inconsistency. And Patroni can provide that. Asynchronous replication, raw mode also supported. We're going to discuss asynchronous because synchronous is quite complicated now for us. And from version to version of Postgres, it can have significant differences. Besides, Patroni has a wonderful thing which is called Patroni CTL. This is a CLI utilite which allows to manage the cluster. It allows to make the cluster bootstrap initialization of cluster process. On default, Patroni uses initdb. But for some reasons, if you need to initialize cluster in different way, you can write your initialization and use it. We will also discuss this thing today. We're going to use Wal-G to initialize cluster from a backup which is stored on Amazon. This is our product-based story. Patroni also can start up standby cluster when you should migrate without downtime. You pull up data from the current master. If everything works okay, you just switch over to the new thing. And also it uses hooks, standby cluster. We're not going to discuss today. We can just discuss it offline. Hook is, it's a wonderful thing, just amazing, which I've never seen in any other solutions. It's very comfortable and you can use it for anything. Patroni follows up changes of cluster changes and allows you to use callbacks. These are Sash or Python scripts which can be used. These hooks can be used when you change a role in the cluster. When an old master is off for some reason, the new one comes up. You can switch over the incoming traffic to your application from some virtual AP from outside to make the whole traffic go to the new node. We have 3 servers. This is our story. These servers, 2 in Germany, 1 in Helsinki, Finland. We use Fetsna there, and if for some reasons master is not available in Nuremberg, Patroni can correctly manage the situation, can switch over to Helsinki, and we need to bring over the whole ingress traffic to Helsinki. We can use it using hooks, and it works wonderful. It is written on Python. It's open source. You can take a look how it's all realized. An important thing which I didn't mention here, but it's ready for Kubernetes. We have Helm charts. You can use these charts in your environment and start using them somehow. Let's do our first step in initializing our cluster. Let's deploy 3 Docker containers, and we will emulate our hardware servers. I hope you checked the version. Just initialize 3 containers with the names H0, H1, H2. Can you see it all okay? Or shall we zoom in? Here we go. And you shouldn't clone it. You already have it cloned in your environment. You can see it once again in the end. You can copy it afterwards. Okay, now we've deployed 3 nodes as a quasi-real servers, and let's make sure they are all operational. They're started. You can check it. You can verify. Well, you can see a bunch of open ports. SSH. Yes, we do use it to connect it with servers. We use Ansible to provide these roles to our servers, and we should emulate it like this. 2375, it's a Docker. You can see Postgres, 8008 REST AP Patroni, and then ports which have relations to console. Patroni supports different configuration management systems, and let's put it in another way. It supports all which we know, which I know. We are going to work with console today, and we're going to use only features of console which allow to simplify setup with different purposes. Okay, we've deployed, and our next step would be to say a few words about console. Who works with console? Please raise your hands. Not many people. Okay, console is a distributed configuration management system. Besides that, it realizes the functionality of a storage, key value storage, and the most important thing, and we're going to base on that, console can be used as a DNS resolver. You can use console as DNS, proxy-based DNS for your applications. We will use it as a DNS resolver for our Postgres container. Besides that, console versus other solutions like Peacemaker has an out-of-the-box feature to check services registered in it. You can build up a monitoring using console. It has a wonderful, on my view, GUI, and very visible, and allows to see how a Patroni is writing there. You can use Playbook and check it. It is written by HE Corp company, very stable product. If you want to work with a Masterclass, you should get the token from our helpers. Let's open console and let's check and see and verify whether it's operational. First, let's check our dynamic inventory. Ansible has an inventory notion. It's a file with a list of hosts where playbooks are used, roles and playbooks are used. In a normal life, in our life, it's going to be a static list. If we take containers, Docker pulls up containers. We should use a special script, dynamic inventory, which shows us what works and where on which hosts. We are going to use it later. Most probably it works. You can clearly see here that host H1 has address 03. This environment, which is open for you, will be ready for work and will work during the whole conference. Afterwards, you can use it to play with your Patronies, with your instances. So you can try use synchronous, asynchronous replication. You can write there, and when you're going to reboot your containers, readdressing will happen, and you should correct something. So for this, you will need your dynamic inventory. Let's deploy console now. We are using, unfortunately, I didn't bring you the link, console Ansible playbook, more than 1,000 likes, more than 1,000 stars in the hub, and we do not make significant changes there. It works perfect with Debian-based distributives and also works very well with Red Hat. What happens now? It uploads everything, fine-tunes the configuration, creates folders, and it is writing init scripts inside these containers, 3 containers, which would emulate our systemd units, and in your case it could be any other initiation system. Upstart, for instance, if someone still has it. Playbook also supports that. Let's check whether our console is alive. Let's check logs of H0. Let me zoom in. To make it readable. Okay, as you can see, a lot of information there, but the main point is that our cluster is being built. The new leader is selected. This is H0 in my case. In your case, it can be any other container. First come, first served. Well, we have a console cluster, which we will use later on to store information there from our Patroni. Who failed? Everyone's okay? Okay. Now we've got this set up, and master is marked with the star, and in reality it's a different one.
Let's look at the key parameters configuration. Later on, you can tune it, but they are of major importance. In my opinion, most of them will use the default. The Patroni is configured by few ways. The first one is the files of configuration, YAM files that we use, but also there is a possibility to configure Patroni with parameters that are described in configuration and with a variable environment, which it's embedded in the playbook, and PG-H1, H2. Scope is scope, and scope is the name of the cluster. In one console cluster, you can hold few postgrade clusters. And what can we say about the watchdog? Patroni has a possibility to use external watchdog because the authors do not guarantee the work of Patroni patents or some components, and they ask us to use the watchdog, and we are not going to use it in the master class. It could be as an apparatus, as the program one. The console is the section which describes the combination of working with the console. This is how it has been declared. Registered service true is the important parameters, which is important for console. And Patroni is obligatory to register the service in console after the node made something, after the daemon made something with the node. So all this work that's been done by us in August last year, and that time Patroni did not support the register of the services in console, but in September, October, they added this support, which is very cool, because with the register of the service inside the console, you have the ability to make the announcement of the service through DNS. This is a killer feature which does not exist with a CDE. Exists with RSTP. This the dot with IP for the Patroni to use identification, address, nothing special. Bootstrap. The section which specifies how Patroni will be initiate first with DB, the standard way. This is why it is empty. It's not custom methods for South, so it's used by the default DB. And DCS, everything that the meanings that which be stored in by console in DCS. TTL can be taken as the lifetime of the master. It's very simple. Verification is in seconds, the time when Patroni is in a standby position, waiting before making verification of what is being done. The loop wait. Maximum lag on is the number of the bytes, the bits from failover to the master, which allows to use the slave for the failover. In other words, if the slave is delayed with the bits, Patroni will not use it for the failover. And the next section for the Postgres is to use PG rewind and the slots, to use the slots and the parameters, which we'll not talk about it later. As for the PG rewind, this is not the only solution Patroni is, and tomorrow I will explain why we should use Patroni, in my opinion. Most of them use PG rewind. PG rewind is an extension with 9.5 embedded in Postgres, which allows to bring back the master into the cluster after there was a split brain, and to have this download all the changed data to the master. The only peculiarity or the problem, let's say it like that, could be when you use PG rewind, You can lose the changes that the master had, but for some reason were not uploaded to the slave. As you remember the CAP theorem, you can choose 2 out of 3. The cluster, which is chosen by Patroni, by availability and the tolerance. And the constancy is not being guaranteed in this case. PG rewind is the thing that is very dangerous because automatically it erases all the timelines at the last master. And using in our production and being monitored, we see that the lag is minimum. And we try to resist to solve this problem. As for the slots, starting from 9.5, it's better to use the slots than not to use them at all. So now we will initiate Patroni cluster, which consists of 1 master. And this is how it's going to look like. Let's do it, and let's try to do it, and looks to halter, and start it up. This is the list of the comments. Let's see, H0 is at 0.2 IP address. So if it's not being done by manually with the container, this is how it should look like. This is the playbook, Patroni need, and tag Patroni need Wal-G. And we're going to use it later on. And the limit is the limitation of the notebook being used and the host of 0.2. We cannot use normal names because this is our specific setup. Let's check it up. Let's add the cluster and let's the master node to the cluster. What happens now? We create the catalog for the cluster and we upload the configuration of Patroni and deploy the image, which is being built up with the progress. It's not 11 or 10. We still use production 06. This is what exists in there is an Wal-G. This initiating systems which uploads the Patroni, and Patroni starts up the progress. Docker has these files stored, and you can use them if you want and have a look and maybe criticize them. We have one problem with that setup. Unfortunately, images do not cache up, and you can upload them. The channel is quite big on the server. I hope it will not much of your time. Let me tell you a few words about our production environment. We use Docker, as I have said, for the progress, and we mount it externally, and we and the base image for all our progress, we use Fusion base image, which is reliable, based on time Docker image with correct system of initiating, which allows to test the events of the Docker theme. Sometimes people say that that there is a slog. The system of initiating, which allows us to use few processors, to upload processors. They say it's interferes with logic of the progress, but I think the logic of the Docker is the following: one server, one container. And from that point of view, there is no interference. If you use the progress, you need to somehow to form the logics, and you need to have an access, for instance, to get up the backup PSH. Meanwhile, it's being deployed. Let's see if it is so. And it's in operation. You see the container is being uploaded with initiator as being. And this is with such a complex program. You will see the progress is being deployed by be start up by Patroni. So Patroni is writing the log, that it's the leader, and that it's registered the service inside Patroni with the tag master, not inside the three console with this tag master. So we say that the cluster is being initiated. We have the first master. Let's make sure that we have a correct DNS name inside the container. I want to remind you that we use console as DNS proxy for all the containers that are being deployed inside of the pseudo hosts. And so console of all the requests, of the queries, go through this. And the console says that in this master point Patroni class, this is the scope, which is configuration service dot console, which provides us the IP 8000. Your application can use this DNS in order to send it to the master base, to have the reference to the master base, and then we will see the migration from node to node, and you can see it with your own eyes. That's what we have checked up already. Now let's deploy the first slave. And let's make sure that it's there, that it's operating and initiated with the master. For that, let's do the following commands. The command is fully identical to the previous one. The only difference is the limit is different. And precisely, it's 0.3. Let's proceed with this command. The process of implementation is clear. We create the files, we take the progress, because there is no action. So we need, for the setup, we need to do it again. So we need to upload it again. What will happen now? Patroni, being deployed in a new container, goes to the console and will see that master log is being set up, and it will understand that the master is being chosen for the current scope, and it will initiate it as a slave. By default, Patroni will use PGP backup for initiating the slaves, and this is when we monitor a very interesting event that happened because we were a little bit lazy. In the very beginning, I said we initiated our Patroni cluster through Amazon LG, from Amazon LG. Helps us to upload the files parallel for the recovery. And the master will initiate it. We have about 9 gigabytes, and it took for the master to initiate for a couple of minutes. And for the slave, for the initiating through the save backup, it took it 40 minutes to initiate. Otherwise, we can initiate slaves in Patroni not through the base backup, but in other ways. In Masterclass, we will not look at it. But you should know that there is a possibility, and for those who want to use it, you can use that. Sinclair and PG backup, the zero base being copied, and then it takes the changes in. And that's how the uploading is being done. When we speak about the manual initiating of the node in the cluster, there's such a thing that is very sharp. I should say that we all know the story about the GitLab, how they try to initiate it manually, power slave, I think, or even the master, and they deleted the catalog, and that was it. As Patroni, thanks to the developers, it allows to use the CTL to reinitiate the node with the help of CLI without doing it manually. Let's look if it's registered with the name of the replica. Let's do this. Let's proceed with the command. So we see that it's being initiated. The master is at 0.2 IP and replica is 0.3 IP address. Let's check the logic. So for us to check that up, what is the logs? This is where it starts up. It registered the server where the container starts, and Patroni bootstrap is writing and initiating the replica because the cluster was empty, so it didn't take much time. So Patroni is being loading, restoring the server. There is such a thing as fatal, couldn't start while streaming. That PGHL does not exist. That's not a fatal error. The fatal error, the system is broken and it does not work completely. But in this case, it's a normal thing because our slave is registering itself the first time in the cluster. The slot does not exist at the master, and it has to be announced. Now it is okay, accepting connection, and this is it. The log H0H1 is a log owner, and I'll be the replica. It takes the logs from the master, initiates, and now everything's fine. And with the previous line, it says it's registered the server, Patroni class and console with such attributes, and with the tag replica. The console gives up this server through DNS with such a name. Replica, Patroni class, service, console. And this is the setup that we get in the end. Let's make sure that the system is very well operated. Let's make the table at the master, and let's say if there is a replica at the slave. And let's do the following actions. Let's create the table with the name beans. The master is being created. Let's see if it's at the slave. This is the Docker's exec, Dr. X exec, and it's sort of like wraps up the template, but it's all in wrappers that we ask for rep secure, and that's it. At the host PG-1, we use the maximum ID from this table. Now it's choosing from 10,000 the row. Let's do the following, the switch of being from slave to the master. Sorry, from the current master to the slave. Let's switching off. From that, let's go inside of the container, PGH1. This is the slave. I want to remind you one more time. Now we're in a shell. This is the command without the wrapper, which takes us directly to shell, to the container with PG1 post progress. And let's look at Patroni CTL program.
There are many different options. Let's try some of them now. I already mentioned reinit command, which allows to reinitiate in the correct way a cluster member in order to avoid manual deletion of data dir Don't worry about some problems or errors in deletion. Use Patroni CTL. Using it, you can do 95% of operations which you will need on your cluster. Okay, let's make sure that Patroni can see both nodes in the correct status. To do this, Patroni CTL command is needed. Config is not in a very standard place, and then list. This error, don't worry about it. It has nothing to do with the operation of Patroni. And the output is described, the scope is described, Patroni class, 2 servers, 2 Docker containers, PGH 0 and 1 with IP addresses. Roles are a determined state, and everything which we need to understand whether we have a healthy cluster or not. Let's do the switch over now. We are going to switch roles of our servers. Patroni on default implies or offers prompts. We just accept these prompts. We have only one candidate because we have only one slave. We accept it. When do switchover, please do it now. Your accept. Too many warnings, I believe, are all justified. On defaults, you can just place yes. You should manually input yes. Now it's going on. You see status is changing, stopped unknown. If we do list quickly, we can see still old master. The old master is stopped. And now it's running. The leader is H1 and H0 is slave. It's a clear story basically, and everything is as expected. Next step would be to model a failover. We're going to simulate it in the following way. In the very beginning, when we initiated our cluster from 3 hosts, we implied that we do not initiate any Docker nets. We use the standard bridge network on default, which allows our L2 connectivity, and the container, which is called H0, will be just switched off and cut off the network, and we just simulate the loss of connection between hosts and loss of one piece of equipment. Let's do it with one simple command. First, yes, let's go out of the container. Let's exit, and let's so we are turning off the current master. PGH1 is the master, and the host which is based on, we're gonna turn it off very quickly, and let's see and that it is all really turned off. It already happened, and as you can see, the information is not up to date yet. And now it's up to date. It is related to the cycle, the loop, which takes 10 seconds. As you see, the failover worked correctly, and the host, which was a leader, is now off, and that one which has used to be a slave has become master. No microphone. It is a good question. I would like to discuss it in the end. Related problems when you have one server in Helsinki and the second one in Nuremberg. We will discuss it later, of course. Let us check now how fencing is working. Let's bring back the container to the network. If you want, you can check pings, whether Let's make sure that everything works fine, and the master can be pinged in the same way. Point 2, after Patroni promoted the new master, it announced it in Consul, and Consul brings up the correct DNS, and all applications get this DNS. A very important remark. The question which you will have, what about the DNS of different TTLs and others? Consul on default puts 0 record on TTL to exclude any caching here. This is the thing how it works. Let's bring the host back, and let's make sure fencing works, and it won't be back there as a master anymore, because we already have the master there. The network is coming up, and you can see lag unknown, but it's up and running. Now lag is going to be calculated. Well, again, H0 is a leader, and it's still leader in our case. It tries to connect it automatically, and it's a very interesting thing. If we check logs now, this is the message about losing connection of console. This is not acceptable. It brings it over to read only. It starts to bring it up. It uses PG rewind. And let's see, in this case, we still have had one switch over, and slot replication already announced for the old, quasi-old master. During the switchover, we announced it. In a situation, if you have one master and one slave without any switchover, we just initiated them. You have a slot on master, but not on the slave, and you have the break in your network, and slot not announced. And then at this moment, after you bring it back, everything, the old master, which is a new slave, will try automatically to become a master, to become a slave again. And but if you don't have a slot there, and log archiving is on, you can face a situation that master winded up something during the break. You can face a situation when there will be no initiation. PG rewind will not be able to find necessary logs to quickly bring up the whole initiation. You will get the new server, the old master, new slave, while waiting for logs. It's not going to be initiated. You will need to make a manual re-init or bring up from some files from your storage and to pull them up. It makes initialization only when it enters the cluster for the first time. It tries to do it when it couldn't find necessary VLs. Now it's up, registered as a slave. Now we have a new live cluster. Everything is up and running. And let's see, now take a look at the initiation method which is available for us using so-called custom bootstrap. Just a few words in the beginning about the backup Wal-G utility. Does any one of you work with this utility? No, nobody. Well, just a few words about history, because it's all interconnected. Quite a long time we've used Barman. Do you use Barman? Barman is a cool thing. Centralized works perfectly. In our setup, with only one problem, when we have to bring up a big cluster, first we need to get it from Barman, then copy somehow to our target, and then to deploy it. And in our real environment, 90 gigabytes, it's not very long, but we have terabyte projects, server is not very powerful, so it took quite a while. I tried to find alternatives, and one of the alternatives, on my opinion, is Wal-G. Wal-G is the thing, some creative rethinking of Wal-G. It's an alternative. It's not a centralized solution. Every host should be managed, but it's a very, very fast thing. It confirms parallelism during backup, and during pumping up cluster from the external storage, it can cache everything during Postgres playing. It can not cache, but it has a prefetching of necessary walls. It prefetches everything during downloading of Postgres, and it is written on Go. Very simple setup, binary, very laconic, very compact. Production ready. It can be really ready. We used 11.13 version. It was really ready for production. The tech from GitHub started to pull when we started to prepare it, and now they announced 1.15 as production ready, not 1.13. For us, it's a setup, I think. But anyway, bugs were found, very significant. We couldn't find them first. And what can we do in this situation? We regularly use backups-based storage, and we're checking this restore. Even if your Barman is stable and fixed, please do not overload it. With Wal-G is the story. If we would face the bug which was announced in the 1.11 and which we use now in production, we ready that the recovery. We can be sure that recovery time is working, and we do not face this backup anymore. That's the thing. Now let's consider. Let's come back to our topic, and let's consider custom init. Let's announce Wal-G section. Wal-G, it's a reserved word. You can use any name here. You can just put a few parameters. The command, the former shell script, which initiates Wal-G, and a few options for recovery. Action timeline, to read out archives. I put it all into our playbook, and we will just have to use it. That's the setup we will get. It's quite simple. Wal-G is there. Basically, it's everywhere, but it's not announced. Let's enter S3, pull up the backup, and initiate. Attention here. We are going to initiate a new Patroni cluster which contains only one master. We're going to change the scope. Look, we still have our H0, H1 old, and the new Patroni cluster on H2, the master, which will be called Patroni class Wal-G. And it's mentioned here once again, change the scope. The scope is being changed in config. Afterwards, you can check the config. Due to the fact the KVL functionally is not used, a few Patroni clusters can be announced in one cluster. We're going to use it in order not to reinitiate our containers. Let's try to start this command. Everything is the same. Tag changed. Patroni init changed for Patroni init Wal-G. And it shows the new config in your playbook with the changes we discussed. Then it announces itself as a leader in this scope and starts to initiate through Wal-G in Amazon, pumping up walls from there. I put it there initially just for you to be able to use it. What is good about Wal-G again? It can be used for compression of archives, and compression is fine-tunable depending on your algorithms. It's a trade-off between the cost of storage and traffic, because the place doesn't cost anything, but the traffic costs some overheads, and especially when the database is being rewritten several times a day, it's going to be quite costly. On default, the cheapest CPU compression is used. It works very fast. I don't remember the name of the algorithm, but it must be LZ4. But you utilize traffic in a full swing, and as a result, it's going to be quite expensive if you get a lot of walls. Broadly and VZMA can be used in order to get much more powerful compression. So as a result, from 3 to 4 times savings from LZMA versus LZM4, and saving of budget. And the restore and backup speed is higher then. Let's take a look at our logs. Let's enter LES. You can see restoration is going on from our backup. It pulls up files from Amazon to LG, and it's going fast. And here our master tells us there's no log, so I'm still not a leader. Recovery begins. It starts to pull up files from the archive, from Amazon as mentioned. At some point it starts to come to life. Launcher is up, and that's all. As a result, it says, okay, I'm the owner, I'm the leader, and I'm the master. And let's make sure that it's really working. It restored something. We have a Wal-G3 table. We didn't populate it. It's quite big. And let's see and check whether it has something there or not. Well, they are calculating. Okay, calculations finished. What this image is equipped with? It is equipped with wrappers, Wal-G, the last production ready 115, and wrappers or scripts allowing to do backup are there only from the master node. And the wrapper asks Patroni whether it's possible to know from recipe many things about cluster. For example, asking recipe /master, you can get 200 of 503 awk. You can make a decision. What are you working with a master node or with a replica? So wrappers, which are inside this image, allows you to take backup from the master using Wal-G, which then is going to Amazon afterwards. And so you can back up archives restore from Amazon and restore. All these wrappers are there. You can check them and reuse them somehow. Unfortunately, when I was dealing with this, I couldn't find good examples. The problem is that there are not examples, and Wal-G breaks the ideology a little bit of correct Linux utilities, which do not write anything if everything's okay. And it breaks the initiation process a bit, so we have to do it somewhere in the site. I send it to dev and new, and CTR stays there and works.
Here we have the link down below to the group in Telegram. And as I've said, the service or the media is the environment that you've been working in. They're accessible for the whole time during the conference. You can look at it this way and that way. They'll be turned off at the last day of the conference. If you have friends or colleagues that would like to have this experience, give the talking to them. Go to the chat, in this chat, add up to this chat. If you have any questions during the conference, I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. The group will exist. I will say a few words. 6th of February, which is Wednesday, we will have the speaker from the core contributor of Wal-G, Andrey Fefelov, and then Alexander Kukushkin, who is one of the authors of Patroni, will tell about the fundamental things that have to do with high accessibility of the clusters more than the tooling or utilities. And me, Andrey Fefelov, will have the speech about not Slonia or PNG, where we use Patroni, and a few more words about our setup. This will be tomorrow. I want to thank the people without who this presentation would not be possible. Mr. Alexei Lisovsky, well, helps us with the terminal and the environment, and Selectel that helped us with the server that we are working on today. So we just ran forward a little bit. This is the Telegram group. If the link doesn't work, please join the group. And I have one more slide, which leads us to the discussion, a different setup, so-called, with a different setup that, in my opinion, is more complex, and we can discuss it now. We need to discuss it now and compare it with what we have deployed. The key peculiarity of our setup is the connection of Patroni and DCS. This switching off to the application, it's very transparent and is reachable with the help of registering this service in the console, and the next setting up this services through DNS. So the application addresses the hoster, the master, Patroni class console, service console. And in case there is a switch off, the failover or switch over, doesn't matter. Based on our experience, the registering, if this is a planned switch over, everything's being correctly done, Patroni re-register the master service, then after initiating, it registers it again, and in case the failover, when something happens, when an emergency case, through the timeout, these keys are being switched off, and no problem whatsoever with this decision. As for the caching, the console on default does not caching the messages. As for your application, should not do the caching, and network itself should not do the caching. What does the console? DNS does not provide any info. The console is very reliable, but in case it is broken, then the cluster life, we cannot talk about that, because this is the major part of the cluster. And speaking about the different setup, as I've said before September this year, the classic setup was this connection, this link. When which node we had TCP proxy, host proxy, HAP proxy, which with the help of Patroni IP received the configuration of current configuration of the cluster and the traffic to the node which announced itself as a master. The traffic for the reading and writing. So for the next one, the pool was only used for replicas, and we had to manage it somehow. As for fail tolerance, the KPID was used, RP and CARP. This setup is more complex than setup with DNS. No microphone. So the question is, why do we need to set up CTP proxy for all the servers in or otherwise than to put it in an external connection? This is not our setup. We presume that these hosts are using the applications. So to use a different port, different pool, redundant pool. A redundant pool for the replicas. One more thing that I want to mention. I lost my thought, unfortunately. Yes, about the hosts having external hosts. In our setup that I've showed you, this is like silver bullet that you have to use. This is our simple and thing that we can show you. Then what you should use when a base is fail-off. So that should use the correct mistakes. The correct mistakes should, and in case you lose the base, my colleagues told me that we need to connect to the master somehow, exponentially, and when the master is alive, to have the connection with it again. If your application does not allow you to do that, then you need to put something at the input PG bouncer and to keep up the connections and to switch off the PG bouncer itself. This is a normal thing to do. I think it's a good thing. So in other words, it is up to you. You can use whatever you like. So one more question. How much time have we used this in production? Since August. The master did not fail, but we lose the connection with the cluster, and we switch it on, this thing, few times. As the less important projects and extremely important projects using the same infrastructure. So to tell you a few words about the infrastructure and the timeout, how it works, and the distribution systems. The console allows, there is a data center meaning and the methodology of the console. We do not use that because Hetzner and our tariff plan, it allows us to use the VLAN, transparent LT, level 2, for all of our 3 servers. And being in Nuremberg, we see in the same switch the server which is located in Helsinki, which is very useful for us. Maybe it is so. So we have RRT, 20 million seconds from Nuremberg to Helsinki. And as I've said, we tested few projects, important and less important projects, just to test how it works. And in September to January, we had about 12 failures, 12 failures of the network equipment, which led to switching. This is the problem of the infrastructure, purely infrastructure problem. We lose connection between the data centers and the time which those 30 seconds that are written configuration TTL parameter, after which the changing of the master happens. This has to do with your infrastructure. Some have very reliable networks, some don't. So it depends on if you're lucky or not. You know, for projects we had only 10 failures, and it's correctly being done, switching off from one to another server, and it takes up to 3 minutes only for the switching off. A console uses Raft. This is classic brain master. The slave is here, the master is there. 2 masters alive? No, it does not exist. We had a situation when our application did not switch off completely, and it was alive together with the master, and it started loading something to the master, and we received this timeline difference, and we could lose some of the transactions using PGConfRu. So this is what I do not recommend. Please monitor, and some of the transactions you can help recover with manually, not using the rewind. If I used a standby cluster automatically, how is it so? Master host and standby cluster. Okay. So Patroni allows to have the possibility to initiate the cluster. Standby cluster takes the server, the Go master, Patroni cluster, which is a standby mode, and it uses it. We didn't set it up, but you can set it up yourself. With the whole help of Patroni CTL, yes, it can be done, but this is a classic, how to say that, case, case with no downtime. My colleagues set up the Patroni above the existing cluster, but this is a solution. Well, documentation, apart from its, how to say that, apart from being completely full, it does not cover stand-up strap, for instance. You cannot just copy it and it works. It's possible, probably. Did we ever face that Patroni, when it erases the slots, when Patroni is switched on? Sorry, there is no microphone. Any more questions? So the question was that you have some important projects, less important and extremely important, but the timeout is the same. Yes, timeout is the same for all the types of projects. We work in one structure. And initially we took the default. Is it the importance of the project or infrastructure itself which is important to you? Yes, importance of the project is important because we use the Patroni for the less important projects and started testing it for the important projects further on. As for the TTL and loop tools, it depends on the infrastructure than the importance of the project itself. The raft algorithm, according to the specification, checks up the hosts about 200, 300 milliseconds. So you say 30 seconds is the buffer that you create in order to make the solution whether to vote to choose the new solver or not. But the raft algorithm made the check up 100 times and is ready. Why do you have this timer of 30 seconds? The console chooses the leader for the milliseconds, and it's very cheap. To choose the new leader in Patroni in Progress cluster is always to restart up of the two nodes, and the PG rewind can be lost. So it doesn't happen immediately. If it doesn't happen in 30 seconds, what will not happen in 30 seconds? When you say PG rewind, these all transactions will be lapse of this time period. How to say that? When the master losing the connection with the cluster is still the master. There is no revoting inside the Patroni cluster, not console cluster. It has its own life. 30 seconds is its network delay, some sort of rupture. Well, something died. The master died, for instance. So in principle, looking at the graphics, we see the network delay of 5-10 seconds, and nothing happens. The log is growing, yes, but since the timeout did not happen yet, there is no revoting, so to say. It was about 3-4 minutes when the network was dead. Of course, everything started to restart. It's very expensive to restart the progress. For the sync replica, you said that you have very important, extremely important, and you use async. So why is it so bad? Why are you afraid to lose some of your transactions, and why you remain on the sync? This is a big question to answer, but speaking shortly, we use Postgres 9.6. We're a little bit behind, so to say. Using the sync replica, when one of the slaves which is announced as a sync has no connection, and everything is broken then. So there's no commit coming from this, and you will not be able to commit even from the master. But a replica can be async. Yes, it can be done, but we're not using it. Mostly because the failover is the situation which is very rare, and we can do it manually in order to see that nothing is not being committed in the previous master, which cannot be taken to the new cluster. And in 11 Postgres, there is a possibility of announcing uploading this cluster from slave sync. There is an option any. My colleague just told me about that. And this problem is being solved. There is a quorum which is being set up in this cluster, which is very well done and easily done. I just want to mention one thing, sorry. We have the contact application, which is used RAM, and even this delay, which is not very important for just few milliseconds. We just made it that way. The application is following the base. This is being done for the last month. Before that, the base was moving, and the application remained on the same location. The old master was external one, but there is application. But Patroni, because of the problem with the network, it moved the master away, so there is a 20 milliseconds between the base and the cluster. And how does it be connected to your question? In this case, we are starting to having the starters. So we need to do the backup switch over and do it manually. So every time, so manually it's not possible. What if it's a night time? How does your system work? Well, we have night shift engineers for this case. Do you exploit your system yourself? Yes, we do. In our case, we sell it to the client, and the client is taking care of these clusters, and we do not have we won't have service support. Yes, then you have to look at the sync application and have a quorum and use the tools for that. How does your system, Patroni system, check up so that master is alive, that is good enough, that the master is alive and it's healthy, that there is no switching off? Do you use the pings or use the cancel checkups and the standard ones? So we use PG ready.
Postgres слушает.
It can't write the new one, maybe. Well, we do not use cybernetics. We are using old approach, Harbit tables. Just from time to time we write these tables and we make sure that everything is written. We just send ticks there. And on top of that, we have pin queue, and it's a very old querying system with different tools, and it fails. We really can know about it. So this thing that you're checking, can it be a temporary table? No, it's a fixed table. It's a permanent table. You send emails via queues, don't you? More questions, please. More conceptual. It's a conceptual one about two masters. So let's say we have master and slave, and at some point master fails and connection is lost to master. So slave should understand whether it's master fail and it has to become a master, or is it just connection fail and master is still up and running. How can we solve this situation? Patroni is controlling it. Well, once again, so your question is how slave knows that master fails. It won't. Patroni is sitting there and checking it. We need 3 nodes at least. Two nodes will learn it, and photonians should also be there. It's a separate story. We do not use it. As for quorum, yes, we studied it, that there should be at least 3 units up and running, but it doesn't concern Postgres. You should have 3 nodes in console to make sure that your cluster is consistent. If you have the odd number, even number, then you will have a problem. One more question? Are you happy? Yes, we are. Yes, we're happy because it seems quite scary from the beginning, but every fail which we haven't studied yet arouses a lot of question. But, well, as a result, we learn every time that our understanding of the surrounding world is not perfect, and we study every time. Good morning. My question is, what if slave fails, and what happens then with the slot? Are you killing this slot, or does it stays alive? Does it stay? I'm not sure. I think it will be still alive. This is our place, our resource, and there could be a situation when someone didn't control it and it died, and someone took this place. So all this, it's a question. Well, there could be only one remedy as the correct monitoring and the correct response time. We use S3 and we have unlimited opportunities, unlimited capacities. I hope it will work and slots will be there, will be kept. There was a question from behind, or maybe an answer. A few words about slots. You can check in the logs. I saw that they're being deleted. How to do to prevent this deleting? It's the question to the developers. The developers are there? No? I saw one. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, for sure, you can contact them. They will be here, available. Okay, well, if still you have questions, please join our group in the Telegram. Thank you very much.